All right, so I guess I'm doing the introductions. Yes, thank you. Today is the first day of our popular arts conference, Speculative Futures, which is sponsored by the AHA, the Alabama Humanities Alliance. And so we do want to thank them. Before I introduce our first welcomer, I do want to thank a couple people in particular, and that would be Jillian Browning of UAB, and Chris Stagel, of not in this room right now, who really pulled the art side together. Yes, who really pulled the art side together that I was not in any way qualified to do. And then two other people who, those of you who are visitors especially should know. Over here, we have Tiffany Grivis and Madeline Burge. And they are the interns who are helping us out the next 2 days. So if you need something, they will be the ones to tell you you can't have it. So without further ado, to the real welcome, I want to introduce Dr. Michael Thrasher. He is the Dean of the College of Communication and Fine Arts, and I would also point out, as by acclaim, the best dean that we have at Troy University.
Very kind. I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. Nokes, for the invitation. I always like to come over here and be at the IAC and see all the great things that are going on, the exciting things, the artwork, the ideas that are being created here. It's a great pleasure, so thank you for the privilege for allowing me to be here. This conference is just a continuation of what is an exceptionally busy week here on campus and here in CCFA. To bring you all up to speed, this is our first annual Trojan Research Week. On Monday, we had CCF Day, where we featured presentations by a number of students, lecture recitals, poster presentations, and so forth taking place on Monday morning. Many of you were there to take part in that. Monday afternoon, we had our honors convocation here campus-wide, and also our college honors convocation late in the afternoon. We have this event happening right now. We have at the same time our annual Mic Check popular band conference happening over in Crosby Auditorium all day today, all day tomorrow. Tonight, if you have time, I hope to see you there. I'm planning to be there at 7 p.m. over in the Trojan Center Theater for the spring production from our theater department. They'll be presenting a play there tonight, tomorrow night, Saturday night, and Sunday afternoon. So you have 4 chances to see it once, or several chances to see it multiple times if you want. And then we'll culminate tomorrow with the Hall Waters Award, which is an annual recognition that's carried out here by the Department of English, in which they recognize a literary figure, a writer who has particular connections to Southern culture. We're going to have Jennifer Horn here, who was the poet laureate for the state of Alabama. She'll be doing a poetry reading tomorrow morning at 9:30 a.m. and we'll have a lunch, actually back over here at the IEC, recognizing her and her contributions about midday tomorrow. And that's just this week. That's just 1 week at CCFA. We have a lot more happening next week. We've got the honors thesis exhibition coming up for art students here in just a couple of weeks. Many more concerts and performances yet to go. So it's an exciting time here at CCFA. For our guests, thank you for coming and being here. We appreciate you being here and sharing some of the activities happening here on this beautiful campus. Research, activity, scholarship, the Popular Arts Conference, and I was thinking about the title of this event, Speculative Futures. And Scott was kind enough to send me the full list of presenters and topics, everything from humanities scholarship through popular culture, art, works of literature. The common theme, things that are changing or have changed in the world around us. I started thinking about that, and I do think about this from time to time, that when I started college, which I don't think was that long ago. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago. But I remember very well that when it was time to register for your courses for the semester, we all rushed to the office to pick up this giant newspaper on big paper in black and white ink, and we would open it up, and that's where all of our courses were listed. So you find your English class or your math class or whatever, it was all in this giant newspaper. And you would go through it and you would try to get a piece of paper and write down when this class met and when that class met, and you put it on a note card and figure out if it would work with your schedule. And when you were happy with it, you took all of that and put it on another note card, and you went to the office and you gave it to, in my case, it was Miss Liddell, who was the office administrative assistant. And we just gave her this 3x5 note card, and somehow she converted that into our class schedule. I don't really know how it happened. She just did it. She just somehow got me into my classes. And then I would go to class for the semester, and there was no such thing as learning management systems or Canvas grade book or any of that. In fact, I shudder at the thought to think that after an exam, they would simply put a poster up on the wall with the grades, usually by a social security number. All just right. Yeah, honestly, they put it up there, and you could just find your last 4 digits of your social, and you got an A, and you felt good about that. That's how you kept up with your grades. So much for Canvas grade. That's what we did. And then at the end of the semester, you were nervous, waiting for your final grades to see how you did. And you had to wait usually a week or 2 after final exams because your grades came in the mail. So you get to go to the mailbox, you rip off, you open it up, and you see what your final grades, what your GPA was, and you had this feeling of relief or not, perhaps, depending on what you got. And that's how it worked. And we thought it was perfectly fine. Everything seemed to just take off like clockwork. A few years later, when I went to graduate school, I was at a much bigger institution, and we found about how technology had advanced, because now when we registered, we could pick up the telephone and we could dial in and punch in course codes, and we could register that way. We still had to go to the big basketball arena and wait in line to pay your fees and things of that nature, but that's how we did it. And it was about that time that something came along called the internet, and people started getting electronic mail addresses, and that really began to change the way that things worked. I can still remember the first time I was exposed to an online catalog at the library, which they were just starting up, but they still ran that concurrently in parallel to the card catalog. You could pull out these big drawers that had 3x5 note cards listing all the books. I say all that to say, in 2025, wow, does it look different? Just about nothing that I just described would be characteristic. I mean, we still have classes, we still have exams, we still have grades, but just about every part of how that transpires is different than it was 35 years ago. I wonder what will it look like 35 years from now. Will somebody, maybe you, be staying in front of a group of other students saying, I remember when I was at Troy in 2025 and we did this, and they will look at you, and you all just look at me, befuddled, imagining that anybody could have ever have functioned the way that we are here. That's what we think about. That's what I think about when I think about the future. There's so much out there that we don't know, that we can't even imagine, quite honestly, until we see it evolve. And that's what's exciting about being in our business, higher education, because we're in the business of asking questions, of imagining the impossible. And you, students, as you leave here, your task is to make that happen. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of the presentations, hearing the discussion that you all have as you begin to explore and speculate on the future. So thank you for being here, and have a wonderful night.
So I'm afraid I didn't have the luxurious experience that Dean Thrasher had, because at my school, you had to line up at the registrar's office. So the first day was the seniors, the next day was the juniors. And because if you wanted to get the class you wanted, you had to be early, none of us had comforters on our beds. We had sleeping bags because you would have to camp out in the line the night before to make sure that you could get the classes you wanted. But, you know, you come from a place of great privilege. Where you and I spent at least 8 nights sleeping on the floor of Jordan Hall at Butler University trying to get my classes. And I usually succeeded. So, tonight we're doing this here in the International Art Center. And, we're surrounded by all this beautiful art that we have here. But this, of course, is sponsored by the Alabama Humanities Alliance, and they're very, very interested in promoting the humanities. And so if you look at the many offerings that we have for you, both today and tomorrow, you'll see that we have, so much that's going to help. But I want to talk a little about, I was looking at the website for the Alabama Humanities Alliance, and I was struck by something. So it reminded me, I was thinking of Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. Stay with me here.
As we all do.
Right, as we did. I was thinking about that, And interesting thing, I was thinking about that, and it starts off with this 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth what's coming. And the reason, and he lays out this metaphor of the nation as being something conceived, and born, and living through a lifetime and growing maturity. And the question at that time was, will it? He's asking, if someone lives according to one lifespan, what will that look like? And thus, a nation. Will a nation die like that? And he gets this, of course, from the Psalms, which says 6 and 10. I can't remember it. I think I probably have it down here. Days of our year are 70 years and 10. So he it's already old-timey talk by the time he's saying. He's alluding to this and saying, like, there's a sense of there's a time frame for things. And the reason so I was thinking about, the reason I was thinking about this was this, actually getting back to what you were talking about was, what has happened with the study of popular culture? It kind of has gone through not just changes, but essentially this academic study of popular culture is about as old as a person. It isn't hundreds and hundreds of years old. It's much younger. It's basically the age of the oldest of us here, which Lincoln's suggesting you're going to die pretty soon, in case you're wondering about this. And so I wanted to think about it from that context. And Lincoln, famously says, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And in many ways, popular culture is the culture, art, the humanities, culture broadly, that is of the people, by the people, for the people. So, back in those days when I was sleeping on the floor in Jordan Hall, I remember having a professor talk to me. I was vaguely musing about going to graduate school because already I was on the path of darkness. She said, I forget how Poe came up, but she said, "Oh, don't become a Poe scholar." She said, "I wanted to be a Poe scholar, but I realized I couldn't do that." And I said, "Why not?" She goes, "Well, you'll always have to be defending being a scholar of someone so popular. You'll always have to defend it." And so, this wasn't 1802. Actually, Poe would have not been born in 1802. But this was this wasn't that long ago. But even being a scholar of Poe was considered a little questionable. That was a little questionable. But things changed pretty quickly. So there was the American Cultural Association was this academic group that was to study American culture. And it was actually not on one particular, it wasn't just literary or musical, but it was basically studying all of American culture. And some scholars who were very interested in this got frustrated because they weren't allowed to do pop culture. And so in 1971, they held their first, they created a separate organization, the Pop Culture Association Conference, which, they're like, we'll do our own conference and we'll put on our own show. And that was in 1971 that they did that. Well, by 1979, 8 years, not 80 years, the PCA and the ACA merged, and frankly, having been to PCAC meetings, I would say it's probably 80%, if not 90% pop culture instead of American culture. Maybe it's just the sessions I'm seeing on there, but it really has gone from, we can't even allow this in our scholarly organizations. One of the things that I often end up teaching about is the Brothers Grimm and their collection of folktales, and they're interested. So, like in the 1960s, really cultural Marxists, but then they developed this theory, which then picked up speed in the 1980s after the collapse of the Soviet Union, where they were trying to figure out, like, how do we support Marxism after the apparent economic failure? And they're like, popular culture. That's the voice of the proletariat. But that was the new idea, because, 19th century, we got the Brothers Grimm, and they're out there collecting folktales. They're trying to create a kind of German national identity, because, of course, Germany is not a single country. There isn't a thing to be German as in a nation state when they're working. And I went and looked this up because I was curious. So they collected their folktales, the voice, by the people in this case. They collected folktales from 1806 to 1812. So they're going out there and they're trying to find any kind of, grandmotherly peasant in those 6 years. In those 6 years, Goethe's Faust, Part 1, comes out. Austen's Sense and Sensibility, Byron's Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, Goya, Turner, Utagawa Toyokuni. Those guys are creating some of their most famous works. And this is the period of Beethoven's most productive time, right? Yes. So anyway, and so all these works are still studied. All these works are still considered great. But the oral tradition, the popular culture tradition, by these German peasants, is standing the test of time and the scholarly, scholarly critique as much as any of these. And so, in that, we already saw long before, Stuart Hall and folks like that were doing their theoretical work. We have more than a century of experience saying that while obviously not all popular culture is going to survive critical scrutiny, much will. And I think that's one thing that we have to acknowledge when we think about popular culture. In the same way, some works of high culture, they end up not really standing critical scrutiny for very long. They just don't work well. In the same way as popular culture, but somehow we forget about those. So one of my favorite examples, and I want to apologize to Maddie because I'm about to badmouth the Archies. 1969, the #1 song was "Sugar Sugar" by the Archies. That was the song of the year in popular culture. Yet, apparently, and that kind of hasn't stood the test of time in terms of critical scrutiny. Mm-hmm. Whereas a song that came out 2 months later, "Fortunate Son," is apparently, according to Vietnam movies, it was actually the rotors of helicopters beat out the tune. "Fortunate Son," you cannot have a Vietnam movie without "Fortunate Son," right? Like that is kind of where "Sugar Sugar" is kind of faded. You can occasionally hear it, but it doesn't have that kind of same cultural impact. In 1991, because of my misspent youth, somehow, I think I was a senior, I might have been a junior, but I think I was a senior. I was between my junior and senior year. I ended up at an academic conference. I can't tell you which one it was. I think it was probably PCA-ACA, but I can't swear to this. And there were, and that was the time when Terminator 2 was coming out. Well, Terminator 1 had actually made quite a big splash in the critical world, and and so there were a ton of sessions on this, and they had rented out a movie theater so that all the movie critics who come there, or movie scholars who come there to praise Terminator, were gonna go see Terminator 2, and they're gonna be very excited by it. And I didn't go because I was not that kind of scholar. And I remember them all coming back, and it was as if, someone had come in their house and kicked their dog. They were all very downcast, and they felt like it did not have the power of it. And I remember having a conversation with one scholar, and she said, it was fun, but it's just not great film. And we see this over and over again, but what's helpful to us is that art and that doesn't rate disappears. So one of my favorite movies is The Maltese Falcon. But The Maltese Falcon that you probably know about is the third remake of The Maltese Falcon. I have seen a clip from one and the entirety of the other one, and the reason they disappeared is one was bad, and the other one I can still smell. It was so bad. We just let them die. And so one stands the kind of critique that we're going to see on art today and tomorrow, and the other one does not withstand that. The other two don't withstand that. And they just fall by the wayside. And so the critiques that we're going to see today, all the culture we're going to see, the popular culture, in part tells us what is going to be the kinds of things that will be studied in 50s. Will some of it maybe fall away? Yes. But if we're talking about it here, there's a very good chance that this is the kind of thing that people are going to be talking about, 50 years from now. I do think in the case of For the People, this is what I think is most important about what we're doing here today. So for a long time, although popular culture was of the people and by the people, scholarship of it was not for the people. It was kept separate away from the fans. And some of this is real legitimate fear. So like in my Poe anecdote, where my professor said, well, the scholar, if you do Poe, you might not be taken seriously. There was a time, those of us who were early on in the Popular Arts Conference will remember, there was a time when actually you had to justify the academic study of popular culture still. And in part it's because a lot of these things were not peer-reviewed events. They didn't withstand the kind of scrutiny that you get for a tenure promotion project. And your chair could say, well, that's nice if you want to go talk about that, but it's not going to get you tenure, so why don't you focus on other things? Or you could focus on that later. And so, in fact, the idea of being a public intellectual, right, I'm not going to put scorn quotes around that, was in essence denigrated and seen as frivolous if it were about the things that are of the people and by the people, if it were about popular culture. And I think that was a real fear. And the other fear that I think was a real fear was kind of infiltration into academic circles by fanboys who might sound good but might not really know what they're talking about. So, and again, this fear is based in some truth. So in my field, I'm a medievalist. The International Medieval Congress, for some years, had to ban the medieval recreationists from the Society for Creative Anachronism because they weren't really doing things that could withstand any kind of scholarly rigor, even though many of the medievalists who were leaders in both, they just had to kind of keep them separate, and it took a while for there to be the door to open back up again, and to say, okay, you can come in, but you have to understand what we're doing here is a little bit different than what you're doing there. And so these problems of the two worlds, each one kind of afraid that it will dilute the other one, or harm the careers of someone who's doing scholarship and studying them. Those, I think, were very legitimate and real fears. And, certainly I worked against that. When I say I mean like basically everyone who's with the Popular Arts Conference spent their careers working against that. But, it wasn't based in nothing, these kinds of concerns. But as the lifespan that Lincoln talked about, the field has grown up. And one of the important things, I think, are the kinds of things that the Popular Arts Conference began doing. Is this the 19th year? I think it's 18th year, 18 years ago. And that is doing a peer-reviewed academic conference, but hosting it within DragonCon. So we do the quality control at first, and then we bring it out into the public, where anyone can come. And I usually like to guess that about a third of the people, if we're speaking at DragonCon, are some kind of scholar or something in the event. And the other 2/3 are just people who are very interested in this cultural artifact, whatever it is. And they have the most interesting questions, and they have the most interesting observations, and they understand more about it and are more delighted, and their appreciation of the cultural artifact that they have come there to learn about grows, and they appreciate that. And I think by being able to breach that barrier in the arts and in the humanities, we're able to really build up the humanities. We're able to build up the arts rather than making these kinds of topics more frivolous. I guess I want to end here, you're welcome, by talking about the Alabama Humanities Alliance particularly. And of course they sponsored this, but I just want to read this to you because this feels to me, well, their mission says, we connect Alabamians to tell stories and to listen, to share ideas and to learn, to link the past to the present, and to seek deeper understanding of our humanity, our vision. We see a better future for Alabama by nurturing the best in us as people. Our work is a public service that promotes lifelong learning, strong communities, a healthy democracy, and prosperity for all Alabamians. So really, could there be any better distillation of a culture of humanities and the arts that will carry us into the future than this? I really think that works for this. And speaking for Troy University, if I can, we're really proud to partner both with the Popular Arts Conference and with the Alabama Humanities Alliance together to bring you the art and the scholarship and the humanities that we have here that are of the people, by the people, and for the people. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate this. And we're going to have our first real speaker, who's not me.
The word real is very liberal. Thank you.
Well, yes, you're welcome. Yes. So, how do they do on time, actually?
You're ahead.
I'm a little early. Do you want me to vamp for 12 minutes?
We're going to take just a short recess.
Okay, good. That'll give